This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Hollow Needle. Further Adventures of Arsene Lupin by Maurice Leblanc. Translated by Alexander Teixeira de Matos. Chapter 1. The Shot. Raymond listened. The noise was repeated twice over, clear enough to be distinguished from the medley of vague sounds that formed the great silence of the night, and yet too faintly to enable her to tell whether it was near or far, within the walls of the big country house or outside among the murky recesses of the park. She rose softly. Her window was half open. She flung it back wide. The moonlight lay over a peaceful landscape of lawns and thickets, against which the straggling ruins of the old abbey stood out in tragic outlines. Truncated columns, mutilated arches, fragments of porches and shreds of flying buttresses. A light breeze hovered over the face of things, gliding noiselessly through the bare, motionless branches of the trees, but shaking the tiny budding leaves of the shrubs. And suddenly she heard the same sound again. It was on the left and on the floor below her, in the living rooms, therefore, that occupied the left wing of the house. Brave and plucky though she was, the girl felt afraid. She slipped on her dressing gown and took the matches. "Raymond! Raymond!" A voice as low as a breath was calling to her from the next room, the door of which had not been closed. She was feeling her way there when Suzanne, her cousin, came out of the room and fell into her arms. "Raymond, is that you? Did you hear?" "Yes. So you're not asleep?" "I suppose the dog woke me some time ago. But he's not barking now. What time is it?" "About 4. Listen! Surely someone's walking in the drawing-room." "There's no danger. Your father is down there, Suzanne." "But there's danger for him. His room is next to the boudoir. Monsieur Daval is there too. At the other end of the house. He could never hear." They hesitated, not knowing what course to decide upon. Should they call out? Cry for help? They dared not. They were frightened of the sound of their own voices. But Suzanne, who had gone to the window, suppressed a scream. "Look! A man! Near the fountain!" A man was walking away at a rapid pace. He carried under his arm a fairly large load, the nature of which they were unable to distinguish. It knocked against his leg and impeded his progress. They saw him pass near the old chapel and turn toward a little door in the wall. The door must have been open, for the man disappeared suddenly from view, and they failed to hear the usual grating of the hinges. "He came from the drawing-room," whispered Suzanne. "No, the stairs in the hall would have brought him out more to the left, unless—" The same idea struck them both. They leant out. Below them a ladder stood against the front of the house, resting on the first floor. A glimmer lit up the stone balcony, and another man, who was also carrying something, bestrode the baluster, slid down the ladder and ran away by the same road as the first. Suzanne, scared to the verge of swooning, fell on her knees, stammering: "Let us call out! Let us call for help!" "Who would come? Your father? And if there are more of them left and they throw themselves upon him, then we might call the servants. Your bell rings on their floor." "Yes, yes, perhaps that's better, if only they come in time." Raymond felt for the electric push near her bed and pressed it with her finger. They heard the bell ring upstairs and had an impression that its shrill sound must also reach anyone below. They waited. The silence became terrifying, and the very breeze no longer shook the leaves of the shrubs. "I'm frightened, frightened," said Suzanne. And suddenly, from the profound darkness below them, came the sound of a struggle, a crash of furniture overturned, words, exclamations, and then, horrible and ominous, a hoarse groan, the gurgle of a man who was being murdered. Raymond leapt toward the door. Suzanne clung desperately to her arm. "No, no, don't leave me. I'm frightened." Raymond pushed her aside and darted down the corridor, followed by Suzanne, who staggered from wall to wall, screaming as she went. Raymonde reached the staircase, flew down the stairs, flung herself upon the door of the big drawing-room, and stopped short, rooted to the threshold, while Suzanne sank in a heap by her side. Facing them at 3 steps' distance stood a man with a lantern in his hand. He turned it upon the 2 girls, blinding them with the light, stared long at their pale faces, and then, without hurrying, with the calmest movements in the world, took his cap, picked up a scrap of paper and 2 bits of straw, removed some footmarks from the carpet, went to the balcony, turned to the girls, made them a deep bow, and disappeared. Suzanne was the first to run to the little boudoir which separated the big drawing-room from her father's bedroom. But at the entrance a hideous sight appalled her. By the slanting rays of the moon she saw 2 apparently lifeless bodies lying close to each other on the floor. She leaned over one of them. "Father! Father, is it you? What has happened to you?" she cried distractedly. After a moment, the Comte de Gesvres moved. In a broken voice he said: "Don't be afraid. I'm not wounded. Daval? Is he alive? The knife? The knife?" 2 men-servants now arrived with candles. Raymonde flung herself down before the other body and recognized Jean Daval, the Count's private secretary. A little stream of blood trickled from his neck. His face already wore the pallor of death. Then she rose, returned to the drawing-room, took a gun that hung in a trophy of arms on the wall, and went out on the balcony. Not more than 50 or 60 seconds had elapsed since the man had set his foot on the top rung of the ladder. He could not, therefore, be very far away, the more so as he had taken the precaution to remove the ladder in order to prevent the inmates of the house from using it. And soon she saw him skirting the remains of the old cloister. She put the gun to her shoulder, calmly took aim, and fired. The man fell. "That's done it! That's done it!" said one of the servants. "We've got this one. I'll run down." "No, Victor, he's getting up. You had better go down by the staircase and make straight for the little door in the wall. That's the only way he can escape." Victor hurried off, but before he reached the park, the man fell down again. Raymonde called the other servant. "Albert, do you see him down there, near the main cloister?" "Yes, he's crawling in the grass. He's done for. Watch him from here." "There's no way of escape for him. On the right of the ruins is the open lawn. And, Victor, do you guard the door on the left," she said, taking up her gun. "But surely you're not going down, miss?" "Yes, yes," she said, with a resolute accent and abrupt movements. "Let me be. I have a cartridge left. If he stirs—" She went out. A moment later, Albert saw her going toward the ruins. He called to her from the window. "He's dragged himself behind the cloister. I can't see him. Be careful, miss." Raymonde went round the old cloisters to cut off the man's retreat, and Albert soon lost sight of her. After a few minutes, as he did not see her return, he became uneasy, and keeping his eye on the ruins, instead of going down by the stairs, he made an effort to reach the ladder. When he had succeeded, he scrambled down and ran straight to the cloisters near which he had seen the man last. 30 paces farther, he found Raymonde, who was searching with Victor. "Well?" he asked. "There's no laying one's hand on him," replied Victor. "The little door? I've been there. Here's the key." "Still, he must—" "Oh, we've got him safe enough, the scoundrel. He'll be ours in 10 minutes." The farmer and his son, awakened by the shot, now came from the farm buildings, which were at some distance on the right, but within the circuit of the walls. They had met no one. "Of course not," said Albert. "The ruffian can't have left the ruins. We'll dig him out of some hole or other." They organized a methodical search, beating every bush, pulling aside the heavy masses of ivy rolled round the shafts of the columns. They made sure that the chapel was properly locked and that none of the panes were broken. They went round the cloisters and examined every nook and corner. The search was fruitless. There was but one discovery. At the place where the man had fallen under Raymonde's gun, they picked up a chauffeur's cap in very soft buff leather. Besides that, nothing. The gendarmerie of Ouville-la-Rivière were informed at 6 o'clock in the morning, and at once proceeded to the spot, after sending an express to the authorities at Dieppe. with a note describing the circumstances of the crime. The imminent capture of the chief